It's time to get some balance back into your lives, as myself, Ian O'Neill, and Harry Powell are here to break down a mad, frantic world, or mad, frantic weekend in the world of mixed martial arts, I should say. My goodness, we have a lot to get through, and we're not going to waste too much time. Before we get going, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow us along if you can. We do appreciate it. Up in the top corner there is the barcode for our SevereMMA Patreon account. If you can sign up there, it would be great help for us. Obviously, our YouTube is being demonetized, so every little helps. Obviously, we have some great stuff over on the Patreon as well. Harry Speaker's Corner this Thursday, the Chasing Pack, lots and lots of things over there. So head on over there and check out the Patreon account as well for us. All right, Harry, it was a mad one this weekend. You've watched a lot of fights today, you said, and let's get straight into it. We're going to stop in Rome, first of all. Cage Warriors 154 and Caolan Loughran, who became the new bantamweight world champion of Cage Warriors after beating Dylan Hazan by a KO TKO in the second round. And it was a phenomenal performance. We were all waxing lyrical about it on the WhatsApp group, Harry. And I mean, for Caolan, look, we're looking at organizations like Cage Warriors to give these guys the best preparation before heading over into the UFC. And Cage Warriors have done that so well through the years. Not only do you just get preparation inside the cage, Harry, but the occasions that Cage Warriors create too. And I mean, for Caolan Loughran, who passed a lot of tests on Saturday night and ticked off a lot of boxes, for him, it wasn't just going in there and fighting. It was going behind the enemy lines. It was going right in front of a boisterous Italian crowd. It was going up against an undefeated guy who was never really looked in trouble, who had been dominating opponents, as had Caolan coming into this fight as well. And you have to prepare yourself, obviously, for the actual fight, but you have to get yourself prepared as a fighter for the occasions as well. And it was clear to me that definitely the occasion was not going to get to Caolan Loughran on the walkout as the Cranberries bellowed out through the arena. He was in his element. He was looking forward to it. And speaking to him before the fight, this is everything that he would have dreamed of. He was visualizing this moment in his head, I can imagine, for many, many years. And then to go out and to produce the level of performance like he did, dealt with a couple of little problems as the fight kicked off as well, adjusted and just produced a stunning finish in the second round, jumped out of the cage into the crowd. It was just a phenomenal performance, and one moment that it's going to be etched in my memory for a very, very long time in terms of Irish MMA and big wins and storylines. What were your thoughts on the whole fight, Harry, and the whole kind of scene that was set over in Rome on Saturday night?
Yeah, so I wrote about this for the Spotlight. I usually write the Spotlight Sunday evening, sort of Monday mornings. I allow myself to ruminate on, who it is that I'll pick or whatever. I'll have a look at fight cards, all this sort of stuff. You and I obviously watched Caolan live when he went out and performed in Rome. And I had settled my mind there and then that I was going to write about Caolan this week, because from a storyline perspective, I don't think there's anything richer. There is something gorgeous and wonderful about winning a UFC title or defending a UFC title, because it's the pinnacle of the pinnacle of the pinnacle of the sport. But I think that there is something more genuine, more raw a lot of the time when you look at a Cage Warriors title fight and you look at the stripped back emotional fighters. Now, that's not to say that, that doesn't happen in the UFC, but when you've gotten to a position in the UFC where you're fighting for a title, for the most part, unless it's a, wild late replacement type deal, you have gotten up the pay scale, up the merit scale, up the media attention scale to such a point where, yes, the merits of winning a title is so much more vast than it would be if you didn't win the title. but you're doing pretty well for yourself. For Caolan Loughran, 8-0, he went and did a number of interviews, both on the Old Triangle and obviously with Pete Carroll, where he was talking about what his life is, what his life actually is, the turmoil that his life is, the poverty that his life is, the arduous nature of the hard work and the effort. And I think when you look at the scale of stage that Cage Warriors are able to place on these sorts of events, the fight feel, the big, large, sort of monumentous fight feel that we got as we waited for both Caolan and Dylan Hazan to walk out on Saturday, just felt enormous to me because of the gravity of what was at stake. Not just the gold belt, not just the potential to either immediately or in a couple of fights' time sign for the UFC, but it's the opportunity for somebody like Caolan Loughran, or frankly Dylan Hazan, should he have won it, to really put some stock, some tangible stock behind the years of graft that they've put in this for little to no money, little to no reward other than just self-belief, right? And Caolan went out, and the first thing that I noticed was what you spoke about with the walkout. He goes out there, he's turned to his corner, enjoys the music as it starts to blare through, and turns around with a smile on his face. Dylan Hazan felt like he was wearing the occasion on his shoulders, and I can completely understand that. You're walking out to a massive card. It was full of Italian fighters. Everyone in that arena is there to see you win that title at home. Napoli have obviously just won the title. Italian spirits are extremely high at the moment. And so you walk out and it's Caolan Loughran in front of you. Now, we can talk about the intricacies of the fight, but I actually think it doesn't matter anywhere near as much as what came out of this for Caolan Loughran. And that was the ability for him to have a cornerstone of his career, to say to himself that everything that he's done, amateur and these 8 professional fights leading up to this, were worth it, that he is good enough to win a Cage Warriors title. This is something to build on. This is something to go back home to a mother, to a father, to himself in the loneliness of his bedroom after a shift at the bar and say, you know what? Actually, I am good enough to do this. I am good enough to go on and fight for bigger things.
Yeah, it was very well said, as was your severe spotlight as well, Harry. Very well written. It encapsulated the moment very well. And yeah, I mean, I spoke with Caolan very early in his career, and I tweeted this out. You know, the sense of belief that he had in himself was infectious, really. When I spoke to him, even without having fought any fights in Cage Warriors, I thought, you know, that belief came through his preparation and certainty, and each and every fight up until this title fight, he's proved everything right that what he said. You know, that he is the best bantamweight in Europe right now. He is UFC ready. I think he is at this stage. And you know, he also tweeted something else out last week that I felt stood firm in the fight, and he said he wanted to kill Dylan with his calmness inside the cage. And I think he did. He was calm before, during, maybe not so much after the fight, but that's completely understandable. But I mean, he's just a really difficult style to try and describe. Like, you're an excellent analyst, Harry. You break down fighters and their style so well. But when you're looking at Caolan's style, what way would you describe it as? It's an unusual one, but an effective one all the same.
It's steadfast pressure. He is a thick fighter, thick in terms of his muscle mass, in terms of his stature. He's not the tallest, he's not the longest for bantamweight, but he is avidly muscled. And he uses that to his advantage. Everything is pinpoint 0 to 100%. He is running at 4th gear the entire time. And what I mean by that is, you see fighters like Drew Dober or Matt Frivola is a great example, and we'll talk about them later, where Matt Frivola is a big hitter, but is far slower in his muscle fibers, right? Slow twitch muscle fibers is what Matt Frivola has. It's big swings, and if it lands, it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt a lot. Well, when it comes to Caolan Loughran, he stands in a way where his entire body is primed at any moment to fire at absolute full power. Somebody that used to do that was Mike Tyson, right? Now, I'm not comparing the two necessarily, but it's a similar idea. Caolan wants to be available at every single second of the fight to slip shots. And when he lands, he wants to land at 100% power. Look at the moments that Dylan Hazan shot takedowns, both the desperation takedowns and the takedowns off overhand rights. Caolan is available immediately, both mentally primed and physically primed, to move as fast as his body will possibly allow him. He's like a wound up switch, a wound up like a band, right? Like a rubber band pulled at its extremity at the entire time, just waiting to snap. Now, that's something that we've said in the past. We question whether his cardio will hold up, to question whether he's going to be able to do that over a significant period of time. What happens when somebody has a similar sort of style and fights back at him? And these are the things that we were answered, the questions that were answered in this fight, because that first round was insane. Both of them landed a vast variety of shots. But I think what won Caolan Loughran that round and eventually that fight was two things. One, the calm that you mentioned, and we'll get to that. But the second is his application of his physical elements. Like I said, he likes to stand in the pocket. He likes to be available. He likes to stand quite upright with his hands readily available, quite close to his face, but he wants to be available to do everything in any moment. And what he was able to do against Dylan Hazan, who had a slightly wider stance, slightly lower in his stance, and was moving his head off the center angle with some nice precision, but when he was throwing his right hands, was dipping his head low and taking himself off an efficient angle, was Caolan was able to move with his upper body just as fast as he was able to move with his lower body. We see this with guys like Israel Adesanya, who stands slightly wider than Caolan does, but prefers to move his upper body to create room for his shots for himself. You see some fighters will just bound out of the pocket if they see a shot come in. We saw that with Aljamain Sterling. We saw that with Henry Cejudo. And again, we could talk about that. But with Caolan Loughran, he is primed at any moment and builds his game around being primed at any moment, that he does move his feet if he has to, but he would much prefer to move that upper body with a slight inch, a slight half centimeter to be able to find that right hand. And he struggled in the first 2.5 minutes. He struggled to do that. Dylan Hazan had a fantastic jab and used it brilliantly well. You could tell that Caolan Loughran's game plan was leg kick, leg kick, leg kick, either force Dylan Hazan to slow, take some of the pop away from Dylan Hazan's ability to shoot with that low leg kick, and to use the right hand as a countermeasure when Hazan came with his shots. But Dylan just controlled the range better, was in and out far quicker than I think Caolan was expecting. And so what did we see from Caolan? Well, he just adjusted. He allowed Dylan that half beat more to take that jab step in and followed him back into the pocket as it came. He used the check left hook. He went to the body gorgeously well. He found the right shovel uppercut gorgeously well. And he showed Dylan Hazan that front kick up the top because Dylan was making himself so available for it with his overhand rights, his dips, and his jabs. And it became a pivotal moment. One of the monumental moments of that fight. What rocked Dylan Hazan first was that teep up the middle. And so variety, cool, calm collection, and adaptations won Caolan Loughran in this fight.
And to throw that front kick up the middle against a guy who's known for his wrestling and his grappling too, just shows the level of confidence that Caolan has in his abilities as well. And like you said, when the takedown attempts did come, the sprawls were fantastic. The scrambles were fantastic. Look, he did get stifled by the jab early on, and it did, I think, as well, take him off his game just a little bit. But like you said, once that front kick landed, it was the beginning of the end. Hazan was hurt, but had a really good poker face on and did very well to last the pace up until the second round. But it was just that wearing pressure and the impact of Caolan's shots throughout the first round and into the second round. It was an unbelievable performance, and one that we'll be talking about from time and time again for another little while. And I'm excited to see what's next for Caolan. We'll probably stay away from what's next. I think he's UFC ready. I think he wants the UFC. I wouldn't argue about the UFC too much, but only if he's built in the correct manner. We also have a Cage Warrior show coming up in November, but I'd love to see him get the opportunity to defend that title in the 3 Arena again. I think it would be a very, very momentous occasion as well. And it'll be definitely interesting to see what happens next. Any final thoughts on that before we move on over to the UFC action?
I wouldn't send him to the UFC yet. But for the very reason you gave us, I would much prefer to see Caolan defend that title 1 or 2 times and then go. Because we know, and this is a conversation that will come out on the Speaker's Corner, there is an element in the UFC where fighters, if they're not built in the right way from a media perspective outside of the UFC, will get lost when they get to the UFC. And that lost doesn't necessarily mean swallowed up by the media, but it also means swallowed up by the matchmaking. And so at 26 years of age, with still a skill set to improve on, right? He's going to go back and he and his team are going to watch that fight back and say, okay, well, how do we not get stifled by a jab for 2.5 minutes? How do we find a little bit more variety in our game before we get to the big show? And I would love to see him go out, defend that Cage Warriors title once or twice more, because there's no rush. And the only thing that's going to happen when he defends those titles, should he win, is that his stock grows. Right. And there may be a show at the 3 Arena, and Caolan Loughran will be at the top of that bill if there is one. We could see if Reece McKee doesn't go to the UFC immediately there. We could see a Paul Hughes if he doesn't go to the UFC immediately on that card. And that, for Irish MMA alone, I think is more important than Caolan Loughran being signed to the UFC immediately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, talks of the UFC. Let's talk about the UFC event that happened. That's 288 on Saturday night. More bantamweights in action at the top of the bill. Aljamain Sterling took on Henry Cejudo. Fight I was really looking forward to seeing how it played out. A very tight fight to call beforehand. A very tight fight in itself. I think, I agree with the decision. Aljamain Sterling taking home the split. But stylistically, the two guys met after the fight. Aljamain had said to Cejudo, and I think it perfectly encapsulated the fight. He was like, Aljamain to Cejudo, I went out there, I made some adjustments, then you made some adjustments, then I made some more adjustments, and then you made some more adjustments. And Henry Cejudo just looked at him and clapped him on the chest, and he was like, I'm very impressed, man. You surprised me with your wrestling. And I think that was the surprise for everyone. Not a big surprise, but I was unsure about how they were going to match up in the wrestling department. And Aljamain looked strong in the clinch, was able to kind of cull Henry Cejudo's attacks on the ground. He wasn't able to kind of get full control. And I think that kind of cost Henry Cejudo somewhat, because the inability to kind of get full control where he could comfortably land shots on the ground or maybe work for a submission, he just didn't have that chance because Aljamain Sterling wasn't giving him that chance in the fight. And ultimately, I think those little small in-between moments from the time the clinch was initiated to what happened from when they broke, I think Aljamain Sterling won almost all of those ones in terms of damage. Little elbows on the exits, little knees on the exits. And it was enough for me to swing the fight. What were your thoughts on how both men approached this fight and the game plans they both laid out on the night? It was like I love that kind of fight for just a technical standpoint. I would liken it to Islam versus Makhachev, but maybe not at the same level as Islam and Makhachev. But it was one of those fights where we had two guys at the highest level playing an absolute chess match out here in front of our eyes. It was phenomenal to look at and fascinating as the fight went on to see how the judges were going to score it and how the guys reacted after the fight as well. Really close fight, a brilliant one at the top of the bill.
I agree. I think as I was watching it, I had similar feelings of this is similar in its in the way it's making my brain work to Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev. And that's that there was just so much happening and the momentum swings changed so often in each round that it's just a lot to try and compute. And so this is a fight similar to Volkanovski and Makhachev that I think we should go back and watch multiple times and study those rounds in individuality, because there's so much to gain from all of them. In the first minute and a half of the first round, Sterling's just showing off his footwork, showing off the versatility, showing off the dexterity of the kicks. The jab is working. Henry cannot find rhythm. He cannot find range. He cannot find movement. He doesn't see openings for takedowns. He's just overwhelmed in that first minute and change. And then Aljo does the thing that Aljo does, which is he sometimes gets a little complacent and he gets a little too caught up in the success and he makes a mistake. I think he ducks his head in for a right hand and Henry catches him with a right hook on the way back up. And it's a solid right hook. And so Aljo goes back to his P's and Q's and Henry realizes that he can find him in the exchanges. He can find him if he starts to implement his own footwork. He can find him if he bursts through some of the mirage, some of the smoke that Aljo's footwork offers. And that's what we saw in that first round, right? It was really interesting exchanges. I thought Aljamain, I agree with you that the wrestling against the cage was absolutely fantastic. For him to hit the, I'll just explain it rather than call it. Aljamain had an over-under. And he's trying to force Henry over his post. He's trying to force Henry to take big steps so he can start to trip him or he can start to improve his grip set to a back body lock or double unders or whatever it is. Henry, obviously, is doing a fantastic job at keeping his balance, keeping an over-under and fighting for the position. And so Aljo steps his left leg deep in between Henry's legs. And what that does is it takes away the gravity, it takes away the base of Henry Cejudo. And Aljo just shucks him over his own hip, drags him to the mat for, I don't know, half a second, 3 seconds. Henry builds back up. Aljamain improves his grip set and then hits him with a reverse broomstick. What's a reverse broomstick? A reverse broomstick is when Aljamain picks the right hip of Henry Cejudo, the right hip that's not connected to the cage, collects up his leg, the near leg, the right leg of Henry Cejudo with both of Aljamain's legs and just turns him the other way where there's absolutely no base. There's no way that Henry can keep his balance and down Henry goes. And I think that immediate exchange, the first grappling exchange we see going against Henry Cejudo, did both wonders and was a detriment to him because I think he then said, okay, well, now I've got a point to prove. And we saw some really, really interesting things from Henry in the grappling sequences. But I think Aljamain stamping his claim to that first round, stamping the claim of my footwork is better, I'm more diverse, I'm more versatile, and I can take you down if I want to, was absolutely huge for him. Huge. I think where the fight was won and lost was actually in Henry not capitalizing on some of the great moments he had in the clinches, in the stand-up positions, because Henry in his own right did well in those clinches. I think I agree that Aljamain won most of them, especially on the exits. But Henry did such a good job at finding Aljamain in the offbeats of shots, in the offbeats of exchanges, in the offbeats of his footwork patterns. And I would like to have seen Henry go and land 3s and 4s rather than 1s and 2s, because there were moments when he caught Aljamain and hurt Aljamain for sure, clipped him good. Aljamain did a good job of exiting, circling off, going back to his rhythm. But I would have liked to have seen Henry really press on in those moments and really try to establish some momentum going forward, because a lot of the time we saw resets and we saw them continue on and sort of figure each other out. What adjustment am I going to make next? What adjustment is he going to make next? Exactly as Aljamain was saying. But just an incredible fight. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff.
I couldn't agree more. He broke it down very well there. And I just want to kind of give Aljamain Sterling his flowers, really, because a guy who's gone in under the radar, and I've been guilty of it myself. No, I always respected him as a fighter, but I think this one, and this is what I was wanting to see from him, and some people say, have you not seen enough already? But the Peter Yan second fight was very impressive to me. I think he's a top elite level fighter, and there's no doubt about that now. And you go out there and you do that to Henry Cejudo, and you do that to Peter Yan. it impresses the hell out of me. That and the game plan that the Longo team is able to put together. I kind of said it on the preview show. We have to start giving respect to Ray Longo and his team, not just for the work that they've been doing with Aljamain Sterling, but the work that they've been doing for years. Back in the day, they created one of the biggest upsets of all time in Matt Serra versus GSP. He got Chris Light and involved in another big upset as well, and Chris Weidman with Anderson Silva. So their ability to put together and read another fighter's kind of style and what they need to do to compete against that is next to none. And I think that the game plan that they produced for a guy like Henry Cejudo on Saturday night was excellent as well. Henry himself, coming in off a 3-year layoff, did excellently well too. I mean, no complaints. I mean, that's as good as performance that you're going to get from a 36-year-old man who hasn't fought in 3 years. So what's your kind of opinion about, maybe Sterling's legacy right now and maybe the way Henry did perform after a long layoff, and should he stick around or should he hang it up at this stage? What's your thoughts on that, Harry?
So I'm really, for Henry Cejudo, I kind of agree with what he said. It's like in the post-fight press conference, he sort of lets the kayfabe go and he lets the facade go, and he's actually who he is as a human. And, he's saying, well, if I can't win at this level, if I can't go out and get the nod here, then what am I doing this for? I've got a family, I've got a kid. This is a hard sport. And he's right. He's absolutely right. I mean, that fight was razor close in some of those rounds. I agree. I think Aljamain did enough, but that fight was incredibly competitive. And if it had gone the other way, I wouldn't be sat here calling robbery. I'd be sat here saying I can make an argument for it for sure. But I understand Henry Cejudo is 36. If Aljamain is now going to go and fight Sean O'Malley, as he says he is, that means Henry Cejudo has to go and fight somebody before he gets another crack at a title shot. Does he want to do that? Does he want to go and fight the next guy? Is it Umar Nurmagomedov? Is it Merab Dvalishvili? Are they going to try and do that one? Like,
he called out Merab this morning as we're recording this. He said his story is not done yet. He wants Merab in Boston. I don't hate the idea, to be honest.
I don't hate the idea either.
I kind of want to see more. Like with I was kind of saying, I was watching it with a few of my buddies on Saturday night. I was kind of saying after the fight, it was like, it was an awful pity that we didn't get a chance to see Henry fighting against a guy like Merab or one of the up and comers first to kind of, dip his toe in the water before coming back and facing Aljamain Sterling. I'm wondering, that's what I'm curious to see after going in there and competing. How is he going to look the next time as well? Because, he'll be fresh off of camp. It can't be said enough how difficult it is to come off a 3-year layoff, come straight into a title shot against a guy like Aljamain and still fight as close as to the judges thinking that it was a split decision. Whatever your opinion may be, I've seen some guys score at 49-46. I think round 1 for me was Aljamain Sterling. I think round 2 for me was Henry. I think round 3 I scored for Aljo, round 4 for Aljo, and round 5 for Cejudo, with a couple of close rounds there in between that could have swung either which way. Do you think he made the right move in coming straight into fight Aljo, or do you think he should have maybe fought a contender first, kind of got himself into the kind of fight mode, camp mode again, and then you would be talking about an Aljamain Sterling fight in Boston where, you're not having that layoff. You've kind of dusted off the rust per se before getting in there and competing?
I think you made the right decision, because if the UFC come to you and say, would you like a title shot? You don't say no. You just say yes. You take the payday, you take the risk. And for somebody to come off that 3-year layoff and perform the way that he did, we were talking on the preview show about whether the athleticism will hold up. It did. We said, would the cardio hold up? It absolutely did. Would the chin hold up? It absolutely did. Did the IQ hold up? It absolutely did. He performed fantastically well out there. And if you put anyone else in there, we may be saying that Henry Cejudo has just beaten and has become the new bantamweight champion. I think the Merab Dvalishvili fight interests me a lot because in open cage, Henry looked untakedownable. The sprawls were fantastic. The front headlock work was great. And Merab likes to shoot in open space. And so that's a really intriguing part of this. I thought Henry looked very powerful, looked strong when he landed on Aljo. That's an interesting thing to see whether Merab can take some licks. But obviously the question is, for me, is also about the cage wrestling. What happens when Merab puts him on the cage? Because Henry was taken down 3 times against the cage. Aljamain, I'm sure, has some really interesting cage battles with Merab, but I think if we were to pick an out-and-out grappler for cage takedowns, we're probably leaning towards Merab, right? And so I like that fight a lot. If Henry Cejudo still thinks his body can churn through camps the way that it did in this last one, and he doesn't need layoffs, then I think he is absolutely somebody that I would like to see fight again. For Aljamain, I've no problem with him taking the Sean O'Malley fight. I think that's a really compelling and intriguing matchup. The range of O'Malley, like Sterling is not going to have the range he usually has against other guys. And so that's just the range in itself, the footwork, the landing shots, the way that Aljamain moves. Is Sean O'Malley going to be able to find shots that land and hurt Sterling? Are we going to see some takedown stuff? Are we going to see some back attack stuff? What are we going to see from that fight? I'm really intrigued in that one, but I do think he should go up. He looked absolutely gigantic against Henry Cejudo. The size difference, I think, is something we haven't spoken about and should speak about a little bit more, because when they stepped in there together on weigh-in day, they looked roughly the same weight class. On fight night, Aljamain Sterling looked absolutely massive. He looked like a featherweight against a bantamweight. And so not only because I know the weight cut is hard for Aljamain, but also because fuck weight cutting, I would like to see Aljamain go up. I think there are some super fun fights from at featherweight.
Absolutely. All the talk before the fight was Henry Cejudo and what he wanted to do. And he said he wanted to go there and beat Aljo. He wanted to beat Sean O'Malley. And then he wanted to move up and face Volkanovski as the featherweight champion. I don't see any reason why Aljamain can't follow in the same suit right now, to be honest. I think you get that fight against Sean O'Malley, whatever way that goes. I'm kind of fancying Aljamain Sterling for it. Stylistically, I think he might be a little bit stronger in the grappling department, but look, we'll talk about that down the line again. Aljo moves up, maybe holds on to the title to call himself a double champ if he can, but just let it go. Who really cares about that? Let him fight Volkanovski. Maybe give Merab the chance to kind of go and fight for the title there if he's still knocking around the top of the division. I think very, very exciting times for Aljamain Sterling and for Aljamain Sterling fans. A guy who still was getting booed as he was leaving the arena on Saturday night, but he didn't seem to care all that much. He's kind of like Marmite Aljamain Sterling. You either love him or you hate him, but there's undeniably a great fighter there behind it all, and credit to him for going in there and getting the job done against Henry Cejudo. Let's move on to the co-main event of 288. Harry, Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns. A fight. Look, at both of these guys didn't perform to the best of their abilities for one way or another, but that's due to the circumstances surrounding these fights. I think you're talking about Belal Muhammad, who's coming off a Ramadan and who took this fight on 2 weeks' notice, and I have to give him all the credit in the world. And a Gilbert Burns, who was fighting his third top 10 opponent in 4 months, and got injured during the fight too, and some of his capabilities were taken away because of that. Look, it was unfortunate the way the fight played out because it wasn't that entertaining, to be honest. I think the roadmap was laid out. It wasn't that entertaining in the fact that I kind of knew after 2 rounds, especially after Gilbert got hurt, that he had the inability to set up his big right hand with his jab. Okay. He had an inability to throw a dangerous left hook that he has. He had an inability to take the fight down. And it was clear to me, I saw him holding his shoulder at the end of round 1, and I was like, his shoulder is hurt here. So I knew that he wasn't going to be fighting to 100% of his capabilities. And I think it did take quite a bit out of his game plan and out of his style. That Gilbert Burns likes to create those scrambles. Whether he gets the takedowns or not, he can create those scrambles and he can land those shots on the feet. And I think all of that was taken away from him in the unfortunate injury, whether it was injured during that takedown attempt or whether it was injured due to wear and tear for taking so many fights at such a short notice as well. But I don't want to take too much away for Belal Muhammad, who still had to deal with the big right hand of Gilbert Burns. who was moving forward and pressuring very well, who defended the takedowns and was in control of the fight really from start to finish. To be honest, he never really looked in too much trouble. The unanimous decision was the result. From an analytical point of view, Harry, what way would you look at that fight?
I thought it was fantastic. It was a fantastic representation of how to beat a big power puncher like Gilbert Burns, because I agree that certainly some of those weapons were taken away from him, and that had a dramatic effect on the actual fight from a like a contest perspective. But watching Bilal force Gilbert Burns to be reduced also to just looking for big shots. I think even if Burns had his left shoulder, we still would have seen something similar, maybe less just looking for big bowling ball right hands. Maybe we would have seen some check left hooks. Maybe we would have seen some more jabs. Maybe we would have seen a little bit more grappling. But I think from the very first round, Bilal set his station out. And I think Burns actually made a mistake in his tactical approach to the fight. But Bilal comes out. Immediately, he's switching stances every 2 seconds. It's southpaw. It's take a wide stance out. It's changing to orthodox as he comes back in to throw his left hand. There's a dexterous left high kick. We're seeing low kicks, body kicks, question mark kicks. We're seeing the left hand land to the body. We're seeing it land to the head. We're seeing him cut angles on Burns. We're seeing, again, more stance switches. And all of this stuff is causing Burns, who just wants to set his feet, bounce into range and throw some really, really powerful shots. We're seeing having to second guess that. If there's grappling exchanges, or he wants to initiate grappling exchanges, he wants to initiate scrambles, he needs a lead leg. Well, if the lead leg is constantly switching and constantly changing, well, the approach, the choice of takedown that Burns has to go with is different. And it's different all of the time because Bilal will not stop moving. And whilst Burns did a really good job, I thought, in the first round of just waiting for his moments and allowing Bilal to come forward, and when he did come forward, Burns would look in those exchanges for the overhand rights or the check left hooks or the uppercuts or whatever. Obviously, the injury played a part, but there just wasn't enough of that. And I felt like Burns was going to need to put the pace on Bilal and put the damage on Bilal to slow the pace down in the later rounds. And he didn't do that. Bilal dictated from second one the pace, the clip, the volume, and the output of that fight. And okay, as again, I'll concede, the injury will obviously have caused a problem, but it doesn't cause a problem as to how quickly you can move your feet, right? It doesn't cause a problem as to how you set footwork traps for Bilal. And Burns had no answers, had absolutely no answers. Bilal's footwork, his triangular motions around the lead leg of Burns was too dynamic. He had absolutely no answer for it whatsoever. And whilst, again, for the final time, I'll concede that having an injury as catastrophic as essentially taking your left arm out of the fight is massive in a fight like this, I can see fighters of superior footwork than Gilbert Burns causing a little bit more problems for Bilal Muhammad in that exchange. And something that I think we saw, and again, this is no disrespect to Burns whatsoever, but when something like that happens, when chaos ensues in a fight, you see a fighter regress to the foundations of what their style is. And the foundations of what Gilbert Burns' style is massive overhand rights and massive hooks. And at elite level MMA, if you aren't able to deal with the chaos and find, when you're exposed, as Shawnee likes to use, the regression and the base fundamentals of your game, if it's lacking or one-dimensional, you will fail. And Bilal Muhammad showed that he is as diverse as they come, and Gilbert Burns did not show that. And I think that's the story of the fight to me.
Big time. Do I think the injury, if it hadn't occurred, would have changed the result of the fight? I probably do not think it would have changed the result. From what I see in very early days, I don't think that we saw the true landscape of the fight because of the injury, but it's almost like, look, it's very easy for me to say as well, Harry. It's like Gilbert Burns kind of gave up and resigned to the fact that, I'm injured now, I have no chance here, and just wanted to kind of survive. Henry Hooft was calling for the double right hand, which never really came. you know, you can try maybe get him up against the cage and try make it a dirty fight. Look, it looked like he had no power, no strength in that left shoulder whatsoever. But I mean, Shawnee was kind of right in ways. I thought maybe a little bit harsh on the big podcast, but right in the ways that you sometimes at the highest level, you've got to try and make it work some way. And to me, I don't think that Gilbert Burns really tried to make it work any other way when he kind of did injure that arm. And look, it's unfortunate for him, but credit to Bilal. Look, he shouldn't have even had to fight this to get a title shot. He's fought it. He's done it. He's undeniable as the number one contender now. And here's hoping he does get that next crack at the title shot. And credit to Bilal, man. He's coming in there and showing more improvements each and every time. And he's racked up quite a good win streak in the welterweight division now. So credit to him as well. Credit to Zhang Yan in the in the strawweight fight against Jessica Andrade. I think Xiaonan, she frustrated Andrade into steamrolling forward, and then that resulted in Andrade just walking straight onto a shot, and that was it. I mean, it was a great performance by Yan, and a frustrating performance from Jessica, who wasn't patient enough to wait for the fight to kind of progress for her to get off her shots. Look at the range we talked about in the main event. It was difficult here where Jessica found it difficult to get on the inside, but the fight was over within 2 minutes and 20 seconds here. So I was like, when I saw Jessica kind of pushing the pace a little bit more, and it was out of frustration, in my opinion. I'm curious, would you think it was out of frustration that she started pushing the fight, Harry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Yan Xiaonan here just has given every single other fighter in this division the blueprint to beat Jessica Andrade. And that's like on the preview show, I went hard for Andrade and said that this was exactly the type of fight that Jessica wins. And I was completely wrong, because in other fights, what would have happened is Yan Xiaonan is the quicker fighter, the more agile fighter, the longer fighter. Well, that's been the story of Jessica Andrade's career. Like, the difference in the other fights is that when fighters bounce in and look to land a 1 or a 2 or a 3, Andrade is waiting. And she times them. She gets timing. She reads timing well. She looks for low kicks just to chip away at some of that speed, just to chip away at some of that willingness to bounce in. And when fighters come in, she lands hard shots. So that dissuades fighters from coming in as aggressively. And that then allows her, as we say, to push the pace and start to land her own shots. In this fight, two things happened. The first thing was Yan Xiaonan just was perfect in the shots she chose to land when she entered and the angle she chose to exit on. She was perfect. Absolutely perfect. In the clip, there was 2 exchanges in the pocket. She won both of them. She forced Jessica Andrade to miss the big swinging hooks because we know that Jessica Andrade is not going to throw anything different. She landed her own shots and she angled off. And the finish was outstanding because, again, the momentum is starting to change in that Yan Xiaonan feels that frustration is building in Andrade and she's chasing more. And in the finishing sequence, literally all that happens is Yan is just cutting a more aggressive angle. Andrade is throwing big, wild left hands and not having her feet follow her. And when I think Yan takes 3 paces, like 3 angle cuts or 3 or 4. And on the 4th, she just stands still and just throws the right hand. And Jessica is so hell-bent on following in for this massive left hook check. Her jaw just walks into a wall. And it's just, not only is it beautiful from Yan Xiaonan, it is fucking dumb from Jessica Andrade to not learn the lesson, not see the trap being set, and to just run head-on collision into a clean right hand. Just beautiful performance from Yan Xiaonan. Beautiful.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And look, I think that Jessica Andrade and her mentality coming into this fight was, let's get the knockout here. Let's fight for the title again. But you have to be concentrating on the task at hand as well. And I think if you were to ask Yan Xiaonan before this fight, if it was to play out this exact way, she would absolutely love it. I think the fight played out absolutely perfect for her. I think she might have even been a bit surprised that Jessica got so frustrated so early. Like, the fight was done within 2 minutes and 20 seconds of the first round. That's not a very long time. Like, I'm wondering, why doesn't Jessica Andrade fight like she fought against Caitlin Chukagian and push the pressure, but without taking too many risks? And let's backing her up and cutting off the cage. Like, she didn't cut off the cage as good. Maybe it was Yan Jianan's footwork that she was surprised at too, which was kind of countering a lot of the forward movement, like you said, cutting the corners very excellently and frustrating Jessica Andrade. But you have to let the fight play out a little bit. Yeah, you're getting hit and stuff like that, but reset, reassess, try for a takedown, mix it up a little bit. She just stayed marching forward and playing into the hands of Yan, really. And I mean, the result was there, and it happened for Yan Jianan because of the frustration of Andrade and her want to go out there and put on a showcase performance and seal the deal for a title shot. Well, you know what? Getting knocked out is not going to get you a title shot. Winning fights is, and staying winning fights. So I think Jessica Andrade, it's back to the drawing board for her. She moved down from 125. I didn't think it was a good idea. Her inability, obviously, when you're cutting weight to take shots as well, is not going to be as there as much as it would be at the 125-pound division too. But where she goes from here, who knows? But all credit to Yan Jianan. Is it? Go ahead, Harry. Yep.
All I was going to say is I actually just think that we're coming to a period in modern MMA where that Jessica Andrade style just doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I think these ladies, it's similar to when, Joanna Jędrzejczyk near the end of her career, when there's Dominic Cruz near the, in the last sort of 3 to 5 years of his career, people have got so much tape on you, and the modern fighters that are coming up have literally modeled and watched you fight for years and years and years. And, when Cody Garbrandt went out and beat Dominic Cruz, he was like, I fought this fight 10,000 times in my head, and he's never fought this fight once in his head. All I've thought throughout my childhood, throughout coming up as a teenager, throughout my amateur career, was I'm going to fight Dominic Cruz, and this is exactly how I'm going to do it. And then he went in there and he did it. And I think for Yan Jianan, obviously it's not going to be to the same degree, but she's been watching Jessica Andrade since she's been coming up, and she knows what that fight looks like in her head. And in modern MMA, the lack of ability to adapt for Jessica Andrade, I think that is the big ticket here.
100%, 100%. Yeah. What do you think next for Yan Jianan? Do you make that title fight? Do you put it on in China? What do you do next?
I got no problem with it. Why not? Like the UFC has there's like a 50-50 chance that they'll strike while the iron is hot. But if you want to make a massive splash in China, they did it for London. They had a March card and they were like, fuck it, lads. We're steering the ship around and we're putting something in for London. Fine. If I'm the UFC, I'm saying, fucking hell, lads. Weili Zhang hasn't fought in a little while. Let's go and find a stadium in China. We've got enough Chinese fighters and we can fill a card full of Chinese fighters if we need to. We've got Korean fighters from the road to UFC. We've got Russian elements that are big over there. Let's put a fight card on. Let's celebrate this. Let's capitalize on this. Why not do the title shot? Fuck it. Why not?
Why not is right. Yeah, let's do it. They'll probably put it on in Utah or some fucking crazy place like that. But it's made for China. It's made for China. Look at Movsar Evloev went out in the featherweight division and took on Diego Lopez, a guy who came in on short notice. Evloev won a unanimous decision, Harry, but it wasn't easy. It was not easy for the Russian, who, at the same time did take that fight at short notice, but I came out of this fight more looking forward to seeing Diego Lopez coming in off a good camp than I am of seeing Evloev again. I think, he did all right, but I feel he still has a long way to go in terms of being able to compete with the highest level in the division. But that's okay. We can give him that chance. He doesn't have to go rushing up into that kind of level of competition yet. But I think, yeah, it's hard to kind of grasp the true performance of Evloev when you are coming in and fighting a guy at short notice, because you don't have the time to game plan or assess his game and kind of implement those into your training sessions too. But your overall thoughts on that fight, please.
Banger. Fucking brilliant fight. Loved every fucking second of it. Lopez comes in with the biggest set of fucking balls on him that you could hope to see in any fighter. Forget the analysis. To come in 2 weeks' notice against the guy of the caliber of Movsar Evloev, of the ranking of Movsar Evloev, and be like, yeah, fuck it, I'll take that fight. And not only just take that fight, but perform in the way that he did was outstanding.
As a top against a top 10 guy, it reminded me of Arman Tsarukyan when he came in and fought Islam at short notice, where it's like, and we all know Tsarukyan now where he's going. I'm feeling the exact same about Diego Lopez here. Look at a 21-60 move to. He has lots and lots of experience, and he proved he was ready for a test like this as well. Like, obviously, maybe you're not throwing him in there with another top 10 guy yet. You want to give him a full camp, give him a chance to get back into the win column. But I 100% agree. He's got a set on him, so he does. He got a good set of stones on him, that man.
So I definitely don't think he's the level of fighter of Arman Tsarukyan, but I completely agree that he's come in and he's snatched a chance with absolutely both hands. And you're right. I'm coming out of this thinking more about how impressed I am with Diego Lopez than I am about the winner in Movsar Evloev. Like, that first round, to me, is the depiction of a technician versus a fighter. The technician is Movsar Evloev. He's expecting to come in and he's got a set of skills, and he's going to say to the fella across from him, you've got a set of skills, I've got a set of skills. We both understand the fundamental notions of wrestling and boxing and whatever, and we're going to do that, right? And Lopez is like, no, mate. I'm going to come over there and I'm going to smash these hands into you as much as I fucking can until you stop coming at me. And you're going to take me down, and I'm going to look for arm bars. I'm going to look for triangles. I'm going to look for near side and far side K-guard, which is wild. We don't see that in MMA. I'm going to look for leg attacks. I'm going to look for fucking anything I can to fuck you out of here. Like, it's in just the difference in mentality was so obvious. And I think that's the thing that took Evloev out of his game to begin with. Because in the second round, when obviously and understandably, Diego Lopez's conditioning and his cardio was not at a fight ready level, we saw that, and that's fine. That's completely understandable. It's not a disrespectful comment in any way, shape, or form. But Evloev starts to take over, right? And that second round was the clearest round for me for Evloev. I went back to Mr. Shawnee Podcast, the judging man himself, and I asked a question about the third round. So the third round, he obviously uses a Kimura fantastically well for 2 sweeps, or like 2 attempted sweeps. And then the knee bars. The first knee bar, Evloev did a fantastic job of misaligning his knee from the knee bar, and he got what's called a handbrake grip, which is where he takes his palm and he laces it inside his own knee. And what that does is, as Lopez starts to bridge into the knee bar, the pressure is actually taken on the forearm rather than through the knee. So Evloev turning his knee to face the sky obviously protects his knee, but there's still a lateral knee bar coming. And so the forearm grip allows him to take the brunt of that on his forearm. But the second knee bar is about as close to finishing a fight as you're going to see, unless your name is Mohamed Bakayev. You saw Evloev start to grimace, and his corner screamed at him that he had 8 seconds. And so Evloev is like, cool, no problem, I'll just take it, right? And he just fucking took it for 8 seconds. Fine.
When you see Evloev like looking to kick off the arms and that slight grimace, yeah, that was really, really close. And I was looking at it at that stage, and I look at the fight, and then I saw it going on. I immediately looked at the clock, and I was like, he's going to have to hold on here. But 10 seconds can be a very, very long time, Harry, when you're stuck in that position, can't it?
Absolutely. And I went back and I said to Shawnee, how do you score that? Because Evloev took the fight down, landed some really, really nice ground and pound on the bottom, some excellent elbows. He landed like a beautiful triptych of body shots to head shots on the ground, some really nice damaging work, and then nearly gets finished in the last 10 seconds. And so I went to Sean and I said, how do you score that? Because in my mind at the time, I'm like, well, round one's close, because Lopez locks up some pretty interesting submission attempts, does a bit on the feet, probably gets outstruck on the feet, but does a bit on the feet. On the ground, it's even enough. Evloev has landed big damage, and Lopez is searching for submissions, searching for stuff, landing his own damage. The second round obviously is Evloev's, and then I look at the third round and I'm like, Jesus, lads, I don't know how to score that. Like, how do we score that level of knee bar? And Shawnee said the same thing, that he looked at that round and he was extremely close to giving it to Lopez because of the knee bar attempt, because it was so significant in the round. Shawnee's comments were that if Lopez had used the Kimura to stay on top and land some shots, and then the knee bar had happened, he would have been more comfortable giving the round to Lopez. But because of the damage from Evloev, and because of his ability to stay safe from those Kimuras and obviously not take any damage from those positions, he had to score it for Evloev. But it was close, and I agree. If you'd have got just a couple of different decisions in that fight, we could have seen Lopez won that fight. And that is insane to me.
100%. It's like I was expecting a split decision really at the end of the fight as well. We got a unanimous decision, and I'm along the same lines as well in terms of scoring. It's that the value of the damage at the start of the third round for Evloev was just enough, but my goodness, he won by the skin of his teeth. Do you do the Bryce Mitchell fight next? Do you rebook that fight again? I think that's the fight for Evloev. I said maybe if he gets the win here, let's throw him up into top 5. I don't want to see him against top 5 again. I want to see him against the Bryce Mitchell type match. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. I'd be very interested to see how it would play out. But yeah, good win against a tough opponent. Look, a credit to Evloev as well, who did beat a tough guy on short notice. I guarantee you he was surprised at the level of competition that Lopez, right. And I mean, no such thing as octagon jitters for Diego Lopez. That's for sure. He fought excellently.
Because I think...
go ahead. No, I was going to move on to the next one. Go ahead.
I'll just round off. Like, I saw a lot of people online talking about Evloev and saying like, oh, like he's not the fighter we thought, he's not whatever. Like, I'd give, like you say, I think the Bryce Mitchell fight is a perfect litmus test for, did he just take a fight on 2 weeks' notice against a fella that's absolutely batshit crazy, that was happy to throw every single kitchen sink in B&Q at him and just wasn't willing to concede anything, was willing to fight from every single position and was fighting that fight rather than competing in that fight. If he goes in and he does Movsar Evloev things against Bryce Mitchell, like we have seen against lower competition, fine. I have no problem with then giving him the top 5 type of fight. But if we see him tested, if we see him against Bryce Mitchell and it's a similar sort of performance where he's getting pushed back, he can't quite find his rhythm, he can't find a way that he can start to really turn the momentum and force Bryce Mitchell to accept that he is losing this fight, well then, yes, okay, we can start to take a back step. But I don't think we can rule out a fighter based on one fight, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see Bryce Mitchell up next for Evloev, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. A guy I'm not looking forward to seeing again, and I doubt we will inside the UFC, is Kron Gracie. Harry, I'm going to send it straight to you as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. It was just awful. It was just awful from Kron Gracie. No other tactics, only 1993 to 1995 or 6 or 7 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style tactics, multiple times pulling guard, heels to the kidney, heels to the spine, an odd front kick here and there, just no answers. And it's a style that doesn't belong and is not going to be any effective against anybody in modern day MMA. What's your thoughts on Kron Gracie? Go ahead. Sorry.
You've hit the nail on the head. You've just summed up the fight perfectly. Like, I think there's 2 comments I have to make. One is that you've just fucking summed this fight up perfectly. 2, Shawnee said this on the preview show. This was an IQ test for Charles Jourdain, and he passed. He hurt Kron Gracie on the feet, landed a bunch of stuff, ran away when he needed to run away, got distance when he needed to, and when Kron managed to pull guard or jump guard, whatever, Charles Jourdain did exactly what you need to do. Keep your elbows inside, keep your posture low, and just bang him, right? Just bang him whenever you get the chance. And the only thing I will say, and I saw this from an analysis perspective rather than anything else, the leg lace that Kron uses to anchor himself to the lower half of Charles Jourdain to then jump guard was interesting. And I'd like to see different implementations of that. But that guard style You go from Gracie's guard style to Diogo Lopez's guard style, and you see which one is applicable in high-level MMA. And Kron Gracie, I mean, Shawnee tweeted it, I think, and I completely agree with him. Replace Kron Gracie with Paul Hughes tomorrow.
100%. I couldn't say it better myself. Look at some maybe criticisms for Charles Jourdain, maybe for not getting the finish, but I'm not going to be critical of him because he was a guy who was on a 2-fight losing streak. And if he went out there and made a mistake against someone like Kron Gracie, if he makes a mistake there, he's going to get submitted. He's 3 fights. Yeah, you're gone. You could be out of the UFC yourself then. So he went in and fought a very intelligent fight and a very smart game plan too, and just showcased that level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not going to work in modern mixed martial arts. So credit Charles Jourdain. Matt Frevola versus Drew Dober was the main fight, the headliner on the prelims card. It was billed as an absolute banger. I had the sirens out and it didn't disappoint. One of these boys was going to go down, Harry, and it was Drew Dober who did, and Matt Frevola picked up the win as the underdog. Very entertaining fight. What were your thoughts on it?
It wasn't great, like my opinion. And the reason for that is like, it was a firefight, but I thought Frevola was trying to force it a little bit, you know? Like he was really, you could tell that in his mind, he'd been like, this is 50 grand. This fight is 50 grand extra in my paycheck. And I'm going to go out either on my shield or Drew Dober is. And look, he got the knockout and the setup to the knockout was great. Really nice pull right hand. I got no problem with the finish. Drew Dober complaining to the referee immediately after, get the fuck out of here. Forget that, son. You're done. But the thing I didn't like was Frevola was just balling shots. And a fighter of slightly better caliber would have stopped Matt Frevola in that fight, would have punished Matt Frevola in that fight. But for what it was, I agree with you. One of those fellas wasn't making it to the third round, and that's what we got. And so, grand, no problem. Finish was spectacular. Absolutely no problems with it whatsoever. But if I'm Matt Frevola and I'm looking at a Paddy Pimblett style, those big bowling balls might get you taken down. And those big bowling balls might find you in spots against him. It might not. You might just fucking knock him out, whatever. Who knows, whatever. It's not like Paddy Pimblett's a star on the feet or anything. But that wild, reckless nature to force action in that way, I think is dangerous for somebody like Matt Frevola. But from an entertainment perspective, I'd watch it again. No problem.
Oh, yeah, 100%. He did call out Paddy Pimblett. About to finish 14 unanswered shots it was. Not all of them did connect. I think there was a period of time throughout the finish. And I'm not going to lie, I did text Sean and just ask him about the finish, because what I thought with the finish is that it looked over and then he kind of looked like he was recovering and he did shoot up straight away, but it was uneasy on his feet. But after I watched back the replay, I had no doubt that it was a good call. And the damage that had been taken from Drew Dober, he didn't need to take. Even if he did recover and ended up taking more damage, it wasn't going to be beneficial for him for the rest of his career. So an excellent stoppage, a good win for Matt Frevola. Calls out Paddy Pimblett. Don't think he's going to get it. Paddy's on the sidelines as well. Paddy's probably not going to be fighting on that July 22nd card. Don't think he's going to be recovered from his injury just yet. So we're probably looking at a third or maybe fourth quarter. And I don't know whether Matt Frevola is going to want to hang around that long. I'm sure he's going to be interested in getting back in there and fighting again. Whilst I don't know whether the UFC are going to want to put Paddy in there with someone like Matt Frevola coming back off of a long injury layoff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and what's next for Matt Frevola. But credit to him, that was a big win. He was the underdog and he went out and fought fire with fire and he got the job done. So credit to him, and another good win on the night for the Ray Longo team as well. So excellent stuff there. Kennedy and Chukwu went out there, got hurt, and then ended up finishing Devin Clark in typical fashion, Harry. Good win. We won't stick on that. We've got a bunch to cover. Chaos Williams, Rolando Badoa, split decision for Chaos Williams there. Nothing to write home about in this fight from my perspective. There was a couple of wild exchanges, but yeah, it wasn't great either. I would have liked to seen Chaos go on for a decision or for a finish at times. Very tentative, but look, at Bedoya was dangerous as well coming in for his UFC debut. We'll stop it for Jandiroba and Marina Rodriguez, Harry. I classically tweeted out, I felt that Marina Rodriguez was going to be able to box her up this fight. But I was dependent on her being able to kind of stifle the takedowns of Verna Jandiroba, and she wasn't able to do that in this fight. And it was an excellent performance by Verna as well. Stuck to that game plan, gritty takedowns, dominated on top, and one of the biggest wins of her career. And Jesus, crazy to say with Marina Rodriguez, who was knocking on the door of a title shot, now drops 2 and is on the outskirts of the 115-pound division right now, with Verna Jandiroba kind of taking all of her heat. And after coming back from that loss against Amanda Lemos, this one will be more disappointing for Marina Rodriguez, won't it, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't call fights correctly very often, but I was high on Verna Jandiroba in this one, and it's because that tenacity for the takedown, the dominant top pressure, and Marina Rodriguez, for as pretty as she is on the feet, when she gets going, if you could take her out of her rhythm, you take her out of her rhythm, and she struggles to get back into her rhythm. And I felt like Verna Jandiroba was going to be able to exploit that, and did. And so I mean, it's a tough one for Rodriguez, but I think it also shows, it shows the wealth and the depth of talent at 115 now, that you have Verna Jandiroba who can come in and just maul her, lass. Just fucking maul her. And okay, I don't think we're going to be talking about Verna Jandiroba fighting for a title anytime soon. I don't think we're going to see that necessarily, but you've got a woman like Marina Rodriguez who we and Spencer were knocking on the door and screaming and shouting about her getting a title shot. And as you say, 115 is a Shark Tank. She's dropped 2 now. And that's a massive rebuild for her. A massive rebuild.
Absolutely, 100%. Parker Porter beat Braxton Smith. Braxton Smith, dreadful. I read a tweet that he had only started in an MMA gym 1 month ago, which is mad that he was even signed up for that. But I think that kind of training showed against Parker Porter. Ishgram Aliskerov knocked Phil Hawes with a right cross. I was amazed by this performance. I mean, I think, there was a lot of hype coming in here with Alex Croft coming in against a pretty tough opponent as well. And Phil Hawes, no walkover, but my goodness, just stood and bang, struck him with a head kick first, which kind of started off the sequence of events. But that 1-2, that jab right cross, folded Phil Hawes like a lawn chair. And it was a wonderful knockout. And it's one way to kind of stake your claim, number one, in the middleweight division that needs these kind of fighters in there. Excellent call out of Bo Nickel after the fight. I mean, as UFC debuts go, man, it was pretty good. He's not going to get that. He's not going to get the Bo Nickel fight. There's not a chance of that happening. But I mean, he did what you got to do when you want to kind of stake your claim within the UFC. A wonderful performance and a wonderful knockout by Iskram in this fight.
Absolutely. I can't sum it up any better. Like, the one thing I will say is Phil Hawes, when he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out really badly. He does not carry a knockout well. And when you get hit like that and you just go into rigor mortis immediately, it's never a good look. But super, super high on this guy. Let's see him again quickly. Didn't take any damage in that fight. Didn't have a difficult fight. Let's see him again quick, because that middleweight division is starving for people.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing him again. Claudio Ribeiro wicked up a ground and pound win over Joseph Holmes in the first fight of the night, so credit to him. We're not going to stop there, because we've got to scoot up to Colorado for one fight night 10. It was One Championships US debut, and I've got to say it was a fantastic debut in the States as well. A very, very entertaining fight card from top to tail. And we'll kick off with, in my opinion, one of the greatest fighters that we've ever seen fighting, in Demetrius Johnson, who's still winning fights at 36 years of age, still beating good guys, because Adriano Moraes is a good fighter, and a guy who's huge in there beside Demetrius Johnson as well. The performance as a whole has kind of sealed, like, if I was to pick my fighters and put them in top 3 status, maybe they're always kind of moving around. I don't like hanging out on it, but John Jones for me was B number 1. I think Demetrius Johnson moves into number 2 after that performance. with GSP, Anderson Silva, and a few more behind as well. But talking about Demetrius Johnson, I don't think you can talk enough about how great he is. You know, to be able to go out there and perform like that, but also to keep yourself motivated after achieving everything that you could almost achieve within the sport, and doing it with the style and with the grit that he had to do, because he didn't have a great start to his one championships career. Lost there. He had to kind of adjust. And this is the thing about one championships, Harry. You have to change your style going in there, because you're not fighting a unified rules mixed martial arts fight. You're fighting an actual fight that's fought and scored as a whole. So you have to approach it a little bit differently. And I think Mighty Mouse has done that. And we'll talk about Roberto Soljic, who didn't really do that and might have to do that for future fights a little bit. But my goodness, this fight for me was won in the clinch for Demetrius Johnson. I have not seen a fighter who's able to generate as much power with his knees in the clinch, and also his ability to land those knees in the clinch at such peculiar angles when he shouldn't be able to even land them, number one, but even land them with such force that took the steam and the life out of Adriano Moraes, and he invested in the clinch and it worked off and it paid off for him, because I was worried for him after round 2 in this fight. He looked like, you know, the size difference was going to get at him, but like I said, invested in that clinch, got off those knees to the body, and it was a fantastic performance and a well-deserved unanimous decision win for Mighty Mouse Johnson. Your thoughts, please, Harry?
So I think that the fight was won in 2 realms. The first realm the fight was won was in DJ's footwork. Because whilst, yes, he was struggling to get off in those first 2 rounds exactly what he wanted, the elusive nature and the elusive pattern that he set in those first 10 minutes, I think played into Moraes accepting those clinch situations, because he was like, well, I need to hit him. And if he's going to be this close to me, I can hit him and I might be able to take him down and I might be able to catch him on the break and I might be able to off balance him and I might be able to do whatever. I might be able to slow him down. I might be able to tire him. Maybe he'll move less. And so when the availability of the clinch is there, you're going to take it. But I think that the fight was really won in the adjustments of Demetrius Johnson. And this is not something that I'm saying as if it's a new revelation. I actually think that forget the athleticism, forget the power, forget the dexterity. The IQ of Demetrius Johnson is what makes him the fighter that he is. And we saw it in abundance in this fight. He took the first 2 rounds. He adjusted in the second from the first. And then we saw the adjustments in 3, 4, and 5, where, as you say, he invests in the clinch. The ability, I'm just repeating your words, but it's shocking to me also, the angle of knees and the core rotation, you shouldn't be able to build power like that, but he does and did. I mean, he was looking for them in round 1. He was looking for them in round 2, and they just started to pay dividends throughout the fight. And just a masterful performance against a guy that looked like it was his uncle in there, and he's a 15-year-old boy. Like, just the size difference was insane.
It was ridiculous, yeah.
For me, I don't know what DJ does now. Like, I don't know that I necessarily need to see him fight anymore. Because that IQ will only take you so far, right? At 36 years of age, the physicality will start to catch up, and the difference maker that physicality against somebody who is as physical as Moraes or somebody younger will start to add up. But my God, I'll tune in to watch regardless of whenever he does choose to fight, you know?
Absolutely, as will I as well. And I think One Championships have done a fantastic job with Demetrius Johnson, who seems like, you know, he's getting a lot more love and support than he ever had in the UFC, even though he broke history and create records in the UFC. I'm delighted to see him still fighting at top level competition in One Championships, and credit to them for the way they've kind of built him up. And I love when they put the belt on. It's just the character of Mighty Mouse. Puts the belt on, he acts like it's too heavy and falls over. It's just fucking brilliant. I just love, like, I think we need to cherish these moments, like, because there's not too often we're going to see fighters like Demetrius Johnson in there. And like, that's what I love watching. I tuned in for this fight. I'm always going to tune in for Demetrius Johnson fight, because he ain't going to be around forever. And when we go back and look at his highlights and his career and the reel that he's produced, he's created finishes in all areas, whether it be submissions, whether it be knockouts, whether it be damaging ground and pound. And he's done it in a sensational manner. And I just love Demetrius Johnson. I couldn't say enough good things about him. But we'll move on down and we'll break the barriers here for a little bit. Another guy who I love who fought in the co-main event is Rod Tang. Rod Tang went in there and destroyed another guy. Like, this guy's story, if anyone doesn't know it, Rod Tang fought and started fighting Muay Thai over in Thailand when he was 9, 10, and 11 years of age to put food on his family's table. They're very poor. They did not have much money coming through. Started fighting in Bangkok in the Lumpini and the Rajamatorian Stadium from a very, very young age. At 25 years of age, he's finding his stardom. And I mean, I don't think there's anyone scarier in there right now than Rod Tang. Like, I mean, his ability to walk guys down and take shots and then get off his own ferocious strikes as well. And it was a beautiful inside elbow that he caught Edgar Juarez Tabarez, who, credit to him, went in there and did the best that he could against an absolute animal. And I mean, the wonder of Rod Tang, the reception that he got in the US just shows that the star power that he has. And, you know, credit to One Championship too, who are bringing a lot of interest to Muay Thai and to kickboxing and to grappling as well. But Rod Tang is one of these cult followers that, like, he's a cult following in combat sports, and just tremendous story and a freakish athlete and an absolutely animal of a fighter, in my opinion. Your thoughts, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to pay homage by talking through the finish, right? Because the finish came way before.
Yes.
Tabarez was looking at throwing teeps, landing kicks, whatever. And Rod Tang just kept catching them, and damaging Tabarez from them. I'm just going to run through my notes very quickly. So I've just put here, the finish is crazy. A lot of the fight is Rod Tang catching kicks and punishing Tabarez for it with body shots. Elbows up top and hooks up top. In this instance, Tabarez throws a left teep that Rod Tang catches in the orthodox stance. He leans in and lands a left elbow, eating a jab for his payments. A second left teep lands, but this time, and this is the magic, he pulls the left leg to his left-hand side. So now Tabarez's back is exposed. He knows that Tabarez has two options. He can either throw the spinning elbow, or he can duck his head and try to exit forward, and Rod Tang's going to throw a left high kick, right? He chooses the spinning elbow, and Rod Tang sees it from a mile away because he's already starting to move to his left, and he frames on that elbow with his right forearm. He now knows that because he's cut such an aggressive angle to his left, Tabarez has two options. He can turn to face him, continuing that spinning elbow, or he can look to duck out the right corner. If he ducks out the right corner, he's going to eat a left high kick. As soon as Tabarez starts to turn to face him, he throws a left elbow. And like the management of that chaos situation, the adjustment to make to be like, oh, fuck this guy, I'm just going to finish him, is unreal. Absolutely unreal. Like,
he does it every fight, man, as well. It's just like, I feel like and speaking of Demetrius Johnson, who went and fought a full round with this guy as well, in the mixed rules fight as well. Credit to DJ. But I mean, when it's pure Muay Thai here, Rod Tang is just the elite of the elite when it comes to not wasting any shots, not wasting any movements, not giving his opponent an inch to breathe. I think he made a great read on that spinning back elbow as well, because Tabarez kind of thrown it early in the fight, which kind of brushed off the arms and maybe briefly connected on Rod Tang, but he just kind of brushed it off and stayed walking forward. But for me, it was like, that's when you have a guy walking you down like that, and especially in Muay Thai, you're using that front kick, you're using that teep kick to keep that distance away, because he doesn't want to be at that range with Rod Tang. For the exact reason why the finish happened is because he stepped in with that elbow, and it was a ferocious shot, and the fight was over immediately. The ref could have called it straight away. And it was just that, if that was your introduction to Rod Tang, well, welcome aboard, because that's what you're going to get every single time. And it was worth a mention here. Plus, anything else a bit on Rodtang before we finish? Because we're going to go to maybe more your neck of the woods now, and Mikey Masumi, who went in there and put on a great performance as well against Osama Al-Mawari for the bantamweight championship in the grappling championship and one championships. Oh, a lot of championships there, Harry. There's a real showcase for bantamweights this weekend, really, in Cage Warriors, grappling, Muay Thai, and the actual MMA World Championships are all up for grabs in one championships. How good is Mikey Mizumi? A guy who doesn't look that dangerous, but can absolutely take it all away from you if you give him a chance. A really astute grappler, isn't he, Harry?
He is. Mikey Musumeci is probably the most technical grappler alive at the moment. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the best grappler, because there's obviously a lot that goes into the grappling, pure grappling, than just technique. But yeah, from a technical perspective, he's absolutely fantastic. I only managed to catch the highlights of this one because I had a limited time to watch fights and whatever. But I saw the leg exchange, I saw the heel hook attempt, and I saw him use that as a sweep to come up on top and eventually choke his opponent to sleep, not to sleep, sorry, to submission. But the thing I like about One Championship and the relationship that they have with grappling is sort of brought into light here, because Mikey is one of, if not the most technical grappler alive, as I've said, and guys aren't going to watch sport grappling, really. You know, we don't need to talk about the fight because there was nothing that happening, but Derrida and Tyro Tolo was a lot of stand up. Nobody's going to pull. There's not an initiation for grappling necessarily. It wasn't what we expected it to be. Mikey, however, is absolutely happy to pull and is he's going to engage at any moment. And I think for sport grappling specifically, putting a fighter or a competitor like Mikey Musumeci on a card like this, where it's full of MMA, there's a Rodtang, there's a Stamp, there's a Solditch, eyes are going to be watching. And when he puts on a performance like he did from what I saw in the highlights, it's only going to elevate the sport of pure grappling. And yeah, for me as a fan of pure grappling, obviously, I'm very, very pleased about that. But yeah, for the other side of Derrida and Tyro Tolo, yeah, we'll need to see a little bit more action in that one. But
100%. I think because we're on that, maybe we'll just talk about it for a second. I mean, nothing really. It was kind of a stalemate throughout. I thought Derrida proved that his strength was a factor enough to kind of stalemate. He didn't really attack too much, but he just had the ability to kind of hold off. He had the ability to hold off Rotolio enough for the fight. But it wasn't a great fight in overall. But let's move on to Stamp Fairtex, who's one of my favorite fighters to watch in mixed martial arts right now. I love her energy, love the way she dances when she comes out. Happy-go-lucky, but when she goes in there, she's a nasty, nasty fighter and wants to go out there and hurt her opponents. Stamp Fairtex, a very astute Muay Thai artist as well, who's actually transitioned over to mixed martial arts and is still constantly growing as well. She's been in championship level fights with one before. She'll be back there again. She fought some kickboxing as well, was out there doing in kickboxing against Jaron Isaac in her last fight and won that fight too, but went out there and produced a fantastic liver kick against Elise Anderson. And just love watching Stamp Fairtex fight, Harry.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I took a bunch of notes because I kind of feel unqualified to put analysis on this style of striking, because it's obviously so different to what we see day in, day out in the MMA world. But her application in these sorts of fights is fantastic. I think the two things that I'll note is she's a minute into the fight, lands a jab that seemingly crushes Anderson's orbital bone. That's not a good start if you're fighting somebody like Stamp Fairtex. And then at 427, we see a beautiful back take from Stamp. Kicks caught. She manages to turn the corner, jumps on the back. We've seen something similar in Cage Warriors before. Obviously wasn't able to get the finish. I thought the referee calling for more action when Stamp was on this lass's back was fucking insane, but I get it.
No, you can't. Yeah, I mean, we could argue all day about that, but that's one championships under crazy rule set, man. we're going to see those separations quite a bit in the one cage.
But the finish itself was just short knees, just damaging, and forcing Anderson to disengage from the clinch. Lands that liver shot absolutely gorgeously, and we're going home, boys. Like, it was, yeah. Just sign me up to watch Stamp Fairtex whenever you want.
Yeah, 100%. Sign it up for me. A fight that was highly anticipated as Roberto Soldic went in for his second one championship fight. Didn't play out as he would have expected, with him, Roberto Soldic, getting knocked out by Zebazen Kadestam in the second round. And, Roberto Soldic will be disappointed with this. I thought he fought a very silly fight. We've had a little bit of a conversation about this already, where he wanted to rely on his ferocious power a little bit too much and didn't respect the guy who was coming in there as a knockout artist as well. And he found out a harsh lesson. I think Soldic wanted to get into the pocket and land the big left hooks, land the big right hands. And Kadestam kind of was looking to counter that throughout the fight with that step in elbow. And we could see him throwing it a couple of times where it didn't land cleanly. And Roberto Soldic just didn't pay any attention to it whatsoever. And it was kind of like the bullish performance that we've seen from Soldic, similar enough that we've seen in the Dricus du Plessis fight. And the exact same thing happened in this fight, and it happened in the Dricus du Plessis fight as well, where he ended up getting knocked out. When he did get hurt, he didn't have a plan B. He didn't look to try and shoot. He didn't look to try and clinch. He tried to fight fire with fire, and you can't do that when you're in that situation. And, it's going to be back to the drawing board for Roberto Soldic, who has had a really disappointing start to his one championships kind of tenure so far. And I'm curious to hear what your assessment on his performance, and also an excellent performance from Kadestam as well, who fought through the fire, who stayed competitive in round one and went out there and didn't get disheartened in round two and found that elbow eventually, because he was trying to land that elbow from the very start of this fight on Friday, excuse me.
A horrific performance, really, from Soldic. Horrific. Because this is MMA, lads. This isn't who's got the best left hand. And I didn't see low kicks. I didn't see teeps. I didn't see setups. I didn't see jabs. All I saw was Roberto Soldic aggressively trying to cut an angle to his left and land a left hand. He threw it to the body a couple of times for variety. Fine, no problem. But there was nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. And that is horrid. For a man of his skill set, for a man of the hype that he has. Shawnee has talked about him ad nauseum. You've talked about him ad nauseum as being a guy that absolutely should be wearing the UFC gloves and shorts. Not with performances like this, against a decent fighter in the middleweight division. Just looking for left hands like that would have had exactly the same result. And the lack of respect for Kadestam, I don't understand. Because
it was one of the worst performances that I've seen him fight in, to be honest. It was like, I still think he should be is a UFC caliber fighter, but I do agree with you. He goes in there and performs like that, he is going to get murked as well. And it's like, for me, even getting off his shots early in round one, it wasn't happening for him. He couldn't find his distance. He couldn't find his timing. He instead trudging forward to try and put Kadestam on the back foot. But look at him, and he did win round. Like, there's no round scoring in this, but he got the better of the first round. He landed more impactful strikes and stuff like that. But it's still, for me, it was like, you're playing with fire here, man, because Kadestam is going to connect eventually. I was kind of waiting for either one of these guys to go down. And as the fight was going on, it seemed like the fight was slipping more and more away from Kadestam, and his durability. Sean did talk about durability, and I think that Kadestam showed some great durability there after taking some heavy shots in the first round, and at the start of the second round too. Didn't get disheartened, and I mean, when you're walking forward like that, just waiting punches, not throwing any kicks, very one-dimensional, you're going to get found out, and that's what happened to Roberto Soldic. He got sparked out. He'll have to dust himself off, and his next fight is absolutely huge now.
Massive, because I do think there's an element as well where one championship, it's in their best interest to match guys coming in with big names toughly. right? You match them harshly to be like, look, our guys are good too, by the way, you know?
Of course, and that's what happened here. I remember I was talking to Sean Denny after the fight as well, who's followed Soldich's whole career, and he himself is very disappointed in the kind of matchmaking by One Championships, where he feels that, you know, they are trying to use him to put him against the best guys. But like, as a promotion, you are going to do that, and you pay that big money for Soldich. You know, you can't put him in there with nobodies really. Like, I don't think that Soldich on his own has got that treatment. I think Mighty Mouse got the same treatment. I thought Eddie Alvarez got the same treatment, and anyone else who moved over there from other promotions as well. But at the end of the day, no matter who you're going up against, you've got to be ready. You've got to prove that you're good enough. And, you know, the questions are going to be there around Soldich, and it's a huge time in his career. All the talk was where he was going to go. He chose One Championships. Sean Denny also spoke about maybe him trying to find that adjustment to fight to the One Championship rule sets in comparison to the unified mixed martial arts rule. May take some time. You know, that's it. I'm not throwing the book out on Soldich whatsoever. I think he's a tremendous fighter. I think he will come back. And I mean, he's not the first fighter to come over into One Championship and have a shaky start. Disappointing first fight. Disappointing second fight, but it's all about what's next for Soldich, and he's not going to be able to go in there and fight like he fought against Cade Stam, against any other guys. He's going to have to try and mix it up and not just rely on his ferocious knockout power, but very, very excited to see what's next for him. Sage Northcutt, Harry got into the win column, picked up a very excellent heel hook against Ahmed Mujtaba. You were kind of waxing lyrical to me a little bit on WhatsApp about the actual finish of this heel hook as well. Kind of clamped the leg in an unusual fashion. Normally you're looking to triangle the leg to try and secure a heel hook, but he was able to get it off with a kind of unusual position where he tightened up the legs and used the pure strength to kind of finish the submission. Talk me through it. I'm butchering it here, Harry. You please kind of describe the heel hook finish itself, please.
So Sage obviously gets dropped and finds himself on bottom. He sort of pulls like a half guard, and then as Mujtaba builds up to try and pass into either a mount or something similar, Sage looks for a single leg X position. Single leg X is essentially when one of your legs is laced through, both your legs are in the inside space, one of your legs is laced through and connected to the hips of your opponent, the other one is connected to the far hamstring, and your knee is the hamstring knee is connected to the ankle that's connected to the hip. It's a good clamp around a single leg, and it's often used in sport grappling for just knockdowns or off balances or transitions to X guard or even reaps, which is kind of what we saw here. Sage, usually what you would do in this situation is you would force the bite, which is what Sage did by rotating his ankles and his knees to the inside space to expose the heel. And when you get that bite, you force a roll by reaping. Sage didn't need to reap, which is scary, really. He forced Mujtaba to roll through just from the pressure of the clamp around his leg. And as you roll through, generally you'd opt to one of two positions, either a double outside figure four, which is where you connect your bottom leg to the hip and then you hamstring curl your top leg over the bottom leg to really get some bridging pressure through the side of the knee. Or something that's been made famous recently by Jason Rao and Gordon Ryan is that you clamp your legs along the top of the knee and rotate your hips to one side whilst you rotate your upper body to the other side to create that rotational pressure. It's almost like when you're wringing out a wet towel, right? It's a similar motion as what you're enacting on a leg. Sage didn't need any of that. Just clamped his legs together, squeezed his knees, pulled on the heel, and Mujtaba was rolled through and then immediately tapped. And either that is Mujtaba doesn't quite understand the position that he's in and the levels of danger, or we have a freak athlete that should be on a cereal box that has insane squeeze in his legs. And I'm probably going with the latter.
Yeah, I kind of maybe a little bit of a mix of both, but everything happens so quickly there. You go from hurting somebody to being caught in a heel hook in a matter of seconds. But look at it. I like Sage Northcutt. I'm glad to see him back in the win column. I think One Championship is a good fit for him, and credit to him after that. Look at to quickly go down through the rest of the card. We're not going to spend too much time on this. And Sang picked up a great submission win over Rong Fan in the 205-pound division. A good guillotine choke there. We spoke about Ty Rotolio picking up a unanimous decision against Hanir de Ridder. Jackie Buntan picked up a lovely body punch and right hook finish against Deandra Martin. I really like that finish in the 125-pound Muay Thai fight. Karakat Akhmetov beat Reese McLaren at 135 pounds as well. He's shaping up probably. That's a good win for him against Reese McLaren, two guys that are looking probably to fight for a title pretty soon there. And Ray Yun Ok beat Loen Tenayes in the opener. Ok, former lightweight champion, getting back into the win column there. And that wraps us up for the balance breakdown. A lot. We tried to balance them all out this week, Harry. Balance out all the organizations, all the fights, all the promotions. I think we did a good job too. Any final thoughts? Look at I'll share a little bit of final thoughts before your final thoughts. I think MMA is in a real fucking good place right now. I'm really having fun watching all these events, watching all these fights. You know, we might complain here and there about some of the caliber of the fights on the UFC, but we can't complain too much about the UFC. We've had a bunch of pay-per-views to kick off this year after the first quarter. Look at this pay-per-view wasn't all to write home about, but it was still a lot of interesting stories to come from it as well. And outside of mixed martial arts, in the outside world of mixed martial arts, outside the UFC, lots of fun fights in one. Cage Warriors doing really good stuff. 3 Irish champions there. Obviously, great to see that on home soil. Bellator coming up with a couple of belter cards as well. It's a good time for mixed martial arts right now, isn't it, Harry?
Yeah, I think my final thoughts are mostly that the UFC is no longer the division where MMA happens. The promotion where MMA happens. You have phenomenal fights like the main event. You can have fantastic performances like a Jans Raunan, or you can have a Bilal Muhammad, who's clearly an elite of the elite welterweight. But then you go out into the wider world, as you say, and there are stories like Caolan Loughran, there are stories like DJ, there are stories like Rod Tang, obviously not MMA, but, you know, the same. Stamp is in there making waves. You have the Soldich Kadastam fights. Like, there is MMA outside of the UFC, and it's presented in a way that is often more palatable, more fun, more interesting, more engaging than the UFC vehicle. And I think that's something I'd like to see the UFC address. I would like to see the UFC go back to a fun, engaging, super entertaining style. Maybe we'll never see it. Maybe we will see it. But I think my overarching thoughts is that MMA exists outside of the UFC, and it's thriving, as you say.
Absolutely is. And we'll do the exact same thing next week. Before that, we're going to do the preview show. That will be out on Thursday. We'll take a look at the upcoming UFC card. Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, Jairzinho Rosenstruck versus Almeida. And Ian Gary is in action against Daniel Rodriguez. His chance to jump into the top 15 of the welterweight division. And we got 1 or 2 fights that are interesting too on a Bellator Paris card as well. Obviously, Fabian Edwards and Gegard Mousasi. Maybe we'll take a quick look at that fight as well. Harry will be back with me then. We'll see you on Thursday for that. We'll see you next Tuesday for the balance breakdown on all those fights. It's been fun. Take care. Have a good week.